Welcome, everyone. We'll give everyone a minute or so to get settled in. Thank you all to those of you waiting in the waiting room. While we're getting settled, a tradition we like to have here on the ngrok Developer Roundtable is we love to have folks post into the chat where they're from, where you're connecting into us from. I love seeing all the different places around the world. Paso Robles, very nice. Did I say Robles right? Or is it Robles? Austin, Texas, Denver, Colorado. Very cool. Thanks for joining us, Alan. I come from North Bend, Washington. Cologne, Germany. Nice. Eduardo, I'm going to mispronounce that. Valladolid, Spain. Very cool. Yeah, make sure to post to everyone so we can all see it. That's true. There's a few that were just hosts and panelists. So post to everybody. We'd love to see where you're from. What I understand, if you know anything about, if you've been following the news, you might have heard of North Bend, Washington. In the last 24 hours, a herd of zebra actually got out of a trailer that was being transferred as was passing through my city. And apparently there is still a zebra running around in the woods in my town. So we go. We'll give everybody just another minute. Good morning from Mexico. Nice. David Kent. Yes, I remember you because I remember trying to pronounce Islington. Islington. Thanks for joining us from California. Yes, Alan, this will be taped and will be available on YouTube after the meeting. You'll be available to use as you have signed up and you've registered, so you'll be able to get to the recording easily. Ilton. Nice. All right, David. Fantastic. Well, it feels like everyone, or that the numbers have kind of slowed down. So we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to this month's ngrok Developer Roundtable. I'm your host, Scott McAllister, developer advocate here at ngrok. I am joined today by my good friend, Senior Product Manager, Salil Subbakrishna. Salil, you want to introduce yourself? Tell everybody where you're calling in from.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Scott. I'm Salil. I'm one of the product managers here at ngrok, based out of sunny Los Angeles. And I'm focused on our developer growth. So a lot of what I work with is our agent, our SDKs, and our Kubernetes Operator, which we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. Salil is a fantastic resource. And please share your feedback if you have any questions, you have any comments about various parts of the product. We'd love to hear them. And Salil, being on our product team, is very open to receiving that feedback and taking it back to the team. So my hope of Developer Roundtables is that this is your opportunity to connect with us and for us to connect with you. Imagine us sitting around a table in a room and just chatting about something. And in this case, we're chatting about ngrok. And so we want to be talking about various aspects of how you're using the product today, how you would like to use the product going forward. And we would love to take any questions or feedback that you have back to our team. So definitely post into the chat. We'll be watching the chat throughout the meeting, and we'll definitely be commenting on whatever you're sharing and answering questions as we go. So we'd love to hear from you. This is all about interacting with you and interacting with the audience and you interacting with us. And so that's the hope of the roundtable today. So what we'll do is the agenda we take is we'll go over a couple of announcements, some things that have happened within the last month since our last roundtable. And then we'll get into our discussion with Salil, and he'll talk about our Kubernetes operator and some of the new features that we have there. And then we're going to open it up to you and have an open Q&A where you can chat with us, and you'll post into the chat, and we'll respond to your questions and to your comments there in the chat. So make sure you have your chat open, and please be in touch with us throughout the show. In case you weren't aware, ngrok is a tool that allows you to provide ingress to a variety of situations and environments. started out as a developer tool, something that you would run in your command line if you needed to get access to your local machine. Say you have an application running on your local box on localhost, and you needed to be able to provide a URL to that application. In this case, we would fire up ngrok, use HTTP because that's the protocol our app would be running on, port 80 there at the top, and then we would set the domain to livestream.ngrok.dev. And that would initiate a session that would allow you to have access into that application. And then that way you can share it with your team. You can test it out with webhooks, have OAuth hitting your application, and you can have that securely and easily have access to your code there running on your machine. Today, ngrok is a unified Ingress platform. Not only can it provide access to a local box, but it can provide access to applications running on various clouds or in your own data centers or in another network. You can have ngrok be that bridge that connects you to the systems that you need to get to. And then as you're passing your traffic through the ngrok platform, you can use things like our built-in authentication, where you can use things like Google OAuth, maybe GitHub OAuth, maybe Microsoft OAuth, or your own. You can use SAML. You can have load balancing or IP restrictions and restrict only specific traffic to your applications. We have SDKs where you can build this ingress into your applications. And we also have a Kubernetes Ingress operator, which we'll also talk about the updates that we have there and some of the exciting things going on there. Some of the things that have been going on within the last month is we've released the network traffic inspector. So we have network traffic inspection inside the dashboard. If you're familiar with ngrok and have used ngrok in the command line, you may have used localhost 4040, which is a pretty handy tool for allowing you to inspect the traffic that's been passing through and that's passing through your domain there or your endpoint. The network traffic inspector inside the dashboard allows you to do that on a productive scale or a production scale. When you're using our Kubernetes operator, when you're using our SDKs, you can now also monitor and inspect that traffic that's passing through your application. And so Salil's actually going to show that a little bit during his demo today. So we won't show that right now. But know that it's there. It's in developer preview. I think people have to request to have it turned on. Do they, Salil? Do you remember?
I mean, I think you have to turn it on yourself.
Okay. Or you have to turn it on yourself.
Yeah, but it's self-service to turn on.
Okay, got it. And so that way, it may be something that you have to opt in for. So definitely do that. Give it a preview. Give it a try, and then let us know what you like and what you would like to see in it. This announcement and other announcements that we have are available on the ngrok blog. If you don't want to wait a month to hear me talk about the different announcements, make sure you keep track of our blog and at ngrok.com/blog. You can see announcements. You can see various tutorials, various articles on different topics, maybe glossary posts that talk about the definitions of different things. And so head over to the ngrok blog. We have posts heading in there, every couple of times a week at least. And so we have a lot of great content happening over there. So find us at ngrok.com/blog. And then I'll post this at the end as well, but our next roundtable in May, if you want to register for that right now, you can scan that QR code or go to that URL and probably just scan the QR code. We'll be on May 28th at 10 a.m. It's going to be a special roundtable where we're going to be talking to the engineering teams that participated in our internal hackathon that we had recently. And we're going to talk about a few of the entries that won and some of the cool things that they're building with the ngrok SDK. These are public SDKs that are available to the world. And so they're cool ideas that you can know that are possible, that are being able to essentially integrate ngrok into other applications, other frameworks, other systems, but on a more permanent level rather than just running in the command line as well. So that'll be what we'll be talking about in May. But today, what we have Salil joining us. And Salil, as you mentioned, you are the product manager over a variety of things, but the Kubernetes Operator is what we want to be talking about today. What are some of the new things that are happening in the Kubernetes Operator, and kind of give us a sense of what's going on and where it's going?
Sure. So the Kubernetes Operator was formerly known as the Ingress controller, and that's because in the past it just supported the sort of built-in existing Kubernetes Ingress, which has been around for, I don't know how long, since the beginning. But Kubernetes Ingress has a lot of challenges. It's kind of since it's an older system, it was built kind of in a, not necessarily designed to solve the Ingress problems of today. There's a lot of RBAC challenges you run into, being able to, if you want somebody to be able to create Ingress and set that up, they need to have pretty substantial permissions, which you might not want to do if you have a large cluster. It also is very difficult to work with from an expressiveness perspective. So if you can create an Ingress object, but if you want to do things like add filters or other parameters or other capabilities, it's really hard. So for example, in our Ingress controller, setting up Ingress so that you just make something available on HTTP, really easy. But if you want to do something like, say, use one of our modules, if you want to use our OAuth module or the new traffic policy module we released recently, you have to create separate CRDs for that and then use annotations to try and link them. And it's just not very easy to work with. The other big thing is it was basically designed for HTTP and HTTPS. If you want other protocols, it's not designed to support those in the same ways. And at ngrok, for example, we support HTTP and HTTPS, but we also support creating endpoints and edges for TLS and TCP. And we then, we basically have to create separate CRDs for that. And it's very, very manual process, and it's not as good. So the folks at the network SIG have been, iterating for quite some time on these problems. And then back in, I think it was November, at KubeCon North America in Chicago, they announced GA for the new Gateway API. And that's an entirely new specification that tries to solve a lot of these problems. So the idea is at first it breaks things up into a more role-based approach. So you have the three sets of entities. You have your gateway classes, which is what infrastructure providers like ngrok or Nginx or AWS would create. You have your gateways, which are cluster operators, the people who are managing the clusters actually set up and instantiate and make available to their teams. And then you finally have routes. The routes are created by the application developers. So somebody's building the application, they create a route so that traffic that's going in through the gateway gets routed to their service based upon whatever they need. And these routes, first of all, there are separate routes for the different protocols. Right now, the only stable one is the HTTP route, but they have specs for TCP, TLS, UDP, and gRPC, I believe. Those are still in experimental. The specs are being developed, but there's plans to build those out as native constructs. And in the case of the HTTP route, and I believe some of the other ones in the future, there are native rule-based options for managing traffic, matching patterns on where the traffic is, what the paths are, or using different sort of filters to do things like modifying headers or doing rewrites, redirects, things like that. And then finally, there's actually a built-in component, they call it the extension ref, which is a way for different providers to add their own customized capabilities that are unique to their products so that you can still build those into these objects. So instead of having to create new CRDs and do annotations, you're taking your route and you're just specifying whatever needs to go in there to actually describe what you want it to do. There's also a whole bunch of other stuff that is very experimental. There's some attempts to try and make, typically Ingress has always been north-south. There's attempts to try and make it this Gateway API protocol east-west and a few other things. But those are kind of some of the major ones that at least, a lot that are really sort of in focus and that we at ngrok are particularly interested in.
For sure. And definitely at ngrok, I think we're especially looking for that support that the Kubernetes group is going to add for additional routes, right? Different types of protocols, things like TCP and TLS, like you were talking about, because ngrok can handle those, but the operator not quite. Not say the operator, the spec not quite. It can handle those just yet.
So Ingress, the way that Ingress operates is, at least for us, if you want to use our operator, you have to, I believe you have to first create the edge for that particular, for TCP or TLS, and then you have to create tunnels. It's not necessarily the most intuitive process. And the way that, but that's also the way you would, similar to how you would do it for pretty much any other product that's supporting anything but HTTP.
Right.
But the idea, what a lot of the people at the network SIG realize is people are using these other protocols. It has to be built in. Now they started with HTTP because that's probably the most common one, and it's a good place to start, and also to get feedback. But they have specs out there for the other ones, and there are some people who are actually building on top of those specs. At ngrok, we've chosen to wait because we don't want to. We want to see what the network SIG ends up deciding before we get too deep into releasing something, because we don't want to have we don't want to have to release a spec and then have our customers have to sort of change and have a rug pull under them.
Right.
But the expectation is, yeah, we want it like people are using all these different types of protocols. The goal is to try and figure out how to support all those different cases, and that's something that the network SIG is doing, and we at ngrok are trying to follow along with that.
Yeah, yeah. So show us. Can you show us some of the difference of possibly doing? Because I think if folks have been watching the previous roundtables, and let us know in the chat, is anyone using the Ingress controller today? As far as the ngrok Kubernetes Ingress controller, and you're familiar with creating Ingress with ngrok inside of Kubernetes, let us know in the chat if you are. This is going to be a little bit different. We're going to be creating different types of objects inside of our Kubernetes cluster, some gateway objects and things like that. So, but yeah, let us know who's involved with Ingress today in Kubernetes with ngrok.
All right. So, can you see my screen? You should be seeing.
Looks great. Yeah. Yeah. It looks great.
So basically, this is an install script I put together. There's a few things you need to do just to get everything kind of up and running on your cluster in order to use the Gateway API. So first is obviously just using Helm to add the repo. It's already done in my case. The second one is a kubectl apply, and what this particular kubectl apply is doing is installing all the CRDs that are specific to the Gateway API. So installing the gateway, the routes, all those different components. This is just something you do once. You gotta just to make sure you have everything set up. And this final piece is just actually installing the operator. I'm doing in the default namespace right now, but the key things to note are you need to make sure that you have your auth token and API key set up and passed in. Now, for folks who have used the Ingress controller before, most of this should look fairly similar, fairly expected. The one thing is this use experimental gateway API. Basically, if you turn this on, it also sets up the Gateway API stuff. However, it sets up the Ingress controller stuff too. So I've actually, if folks want, I'm going to focus on Gateway API, but I can set up the Ingress controller in the same cluster too. This just sort of sets it up and gets it ready for that. So
if I already have the Helm chart installed for the Ingress controller and I want to use the Gateway API, is that how I would do it? How would I get that?
Yeah, you probably would need to update your install and set that additional flag. You want to pull a more recent version, because if you're using one from, say, 4 or 5 months ago, we didn't have the Gateway API support. That came out early mid-March, I believe. And so if you're running a version from before that, it won't have Gateway API support. But if you do have a more recent version, you're going to need to set that use experimental Gateway API flag to true, because that's what will set up and use the Gateway API components, because we have Gateway API support, but given the Gateway API itself is relatively new, we know a lot of people are going to be using the Ingress controller, and we wanted people to be able to just use that if they wanted, or to use both if they were interested. So yeah, I'm just going to run this anyway. It probably won't do anything. It'll say, yep, everything's set up. It's saying the installation has failed because I have it already installed. So because it's already reused. So the other thing, next thing I'm just going to do is I'm just going to do a couple quick things just to set up some namespaces and create a couple services just so that there's something to actually forward to. I'm just using a very basic echo service. So whatever request goes in, it'll spit it right back out. So I've done this now. I've set it up. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the gateway manifest that I'm putting in here. So there's two pieces. One is this gateway class that I'm setting up, which is really just saying, if I'm setting this up, this is the controller. Just this is something just so you know what you're doing. And then this is the gateway itself. And so in this particular gateway, I basically name it, I tell which gateway class I'm using, and then I have to create a listener. And the listener is kind of where it's checking and picking up traffic and where the routes can actually be attached to. So in this particular case, I'm just creating one that's salilgateway.ngrok.app on 443. And I'm specifically requesting it can only take HTTP routes. So if somebody tried to connect we don't support a TLS route for this, but if somebody tried to connect a TLS route, it would say you can't do that.
So you set up as the HTTP route, but you can still specify TLS as an argument.
No, so what happens is, and this, I think this will make a little bit more sense when I get to the route, but basically one of the restrictions you can put on the gateway is what kind of routes it can take. So if you want a particular gateway to say just handle HTTP traffic, you can restrict it so that only HTTP routes can be connected to that. And if somebody tries to connect another type, it just won't let it.
Okay.
Now in our case, we only have the ngrok HTTP route built out. We don't have a TCP or TLS route implementation yet. So that's why it'll be a little different. So I'm going to create this gateway. And I'm going to, so the gateway class was already installed and I've created this gateway. Now, if I go back to my edges page where I would expect to see things show up, I refresh, you may notice there is nothing there except this existing one I have. And that is expected. The way that we've set up things for Gateway API is we create edges based upon the routes, because the gateway can just sort of be there. It's not really if it's not actually routing traffic anywhere, having edges doesn't really make sense. Once there's an actual way to route traffic, that's when we should see an edge. So we go to this manifest. This is just a very basic HTTP route. Again, some basic metadata. I specify which gateway it's supposed to be linked to. I specify a host name so it knows where to route traffic. The host names between the gateway and the routes themselves, they can be, in this case, I've made them identical for that listener, just to keep it simple. But you can use different types of wildcard matching and stuff like that. The only requirement is, in order for it to route traffic, there has to be some overlap in whatever the path is. So how you do want to do that, that's kind of up to you. But yeah, basically, when I do that, it's going to send everything to this particular service. So let's kick this off. And if I refresh, I should see we have salilgateway.ngrok.app. And if any of y'all, this is, like I said, this is the basic one. I will throw this in the chat too, if anyone wants to just sort of click this, see what it does. But yeah, if you can see, it's just passing along some basic information, just echoing the request that got in. Pretty basic stuff, very simple. But if we want to do something that's maybe a little bit more interesting, this is a slightly modified version of that manifest. And so, as you can see, it probably looks very, very similar, except for this filters section. In this case, I'm adding a request header modifier filter, and I'm adding in a handful of different filters. So, adding is gateway, saying hello to me, adding in the country, and then removing the refer. And so, if you look here, see none of those fields, and you can see the refer is dashboard.ngrok.com. But we now apply this filter. Now, if I go back and just give a quick refresh. So for starters, you may notice there's this traffic policy that's been added in there. These filters that we have are using our newer ngrok traffic policy module underneath the hood to actually build these. And then if you look here, you'll notice is gateway is true, saying hello to me, and that refer header is gone now. And yep. And so, yeah, this is essentially what we kind of can do with the Gateway API. Now, right now, it is the way this is kind of set up. We support a limited number of these sort of filters. There is the ability to request to modify request headers. I believe we can support response headers too. Redirect, rewrite, and a handful of others. Basically, there's a couple of core filters that the Gateway API supports, and we've built in support for those so far. We're building out larger support for our policy module as a whole. So all the different policies that you can build using our policy engine, using cell expressions and expressions and actions and all that stuff. That's coming soon, and that's something we're going to be adding in the coming weeks.
Because we're actively developing that policy engine today, right? That's a new feature that we talked about on a few shows ago, and with Rachel. And so, yeah, that's great that those two will be coming together.
Yeah. So what Rachel and her team are doing is they're building out the policy engine as a whole, so that they're building new capabilities into it, so it can do more of the kinds of things that our current module support, as well as adding in a lot of other capabilities. What we're kind of that's kind of one piece of it, and all the work that they've done is is what backs all these sort of filters that we have. So if you look at this example I showed earlier, this is kind of conforming to the spec that the Gateway API supports. But really, what's happening under the hood is we're translating this into a policy, and that's why if you go to this. I'm not sure if you can see this policy in here. Yep, you can see this. There's a remove headers action, adding in the headers, etc.
Nice. So we're already getting into the policy engine.
The Gateway API actually only uses policies.
Cool.
By design, and we're adding support so that, because right now the policies we can support, it's a limited subset based upon what's supported in the spec. What we're in the process of doing is we're actually creating a more general way to support policies, both for our Ingress controller and for this Gateway API. And what you'll be able to do in the future is there'll be kind of another filter type you see where you can just add in a whole. We're creating a CRD to support this. Basically, just be able to link to that CRD, and it'll pull in, create a policy from that and add that in.
Very cool.
However, while we're here, let's figure why don't we check out the traffic inspector. So let's see. We have. Just going to pick this. This is kind of what we're seeing right now. So basically what we're doing here is we get the request. We have all the headers, all that kind of information. We can have all that kind of raw data. I'm guessing this is probably someone else who's on the call, because it's a Mozilla one, I believe. So yeah, but basically this is kind of the data that we have. We can capture responses to. But yeah, that's essentially what the traffic inspector is doing. It's capturing that data and giving the ability to share it. There is also a replay option here, which is something that we're kind of looking into. We're building out, and I know that's especially interesting for some of our customers who are using webhooks, because if they want to, if they get a request and let's say they're working with the payment processor, they're doing something there, they're testing something, and let's say backend service isn't working the way they expect it to. They can then just replay these requests again and again, and not have to, say, create new credit card transactions or things like that to retest everything.
I was talking to someone at a conference last week, and when I showed them that, they said, "Oh, wow!" I mean, not even in the webhook context, but just in the traffic context. When he's seeing like an incident happening with incoming traffic into their application, and then you can say, "Oh, wow, I can actually sit there and replay that." So that way we can figure out what is actually causing the problem, and then figure it out, rather than asking the person to keep hitting their API to figure it out.
Exactly. Yeah, and this is something that like our excuse me, our team is expanding and trying to grow out to add more capabilities there. But yeah, there's a lot of really exciting stuff you can do there.
Yeah. Very cool stuff.
Uh,
If anyone has any questions, let us know. Put it either in the chat or in the Q&A. We'd love to we have Salil here to be our resource. So definitely get those questions into the chat. Salil, is there anything else with the Gateway API that we should be looking for?
yeah, I mean, we're continuing to expand its capabilities. As I mentioned before, we're looking to add more general policy support, and that's certainly going to be a big piece of what we're doing in the short term, because right now the Gateway API, as I said, has only those couple of filters that you can add in. But as we add more general policy support and grow out that capability, it means that you're going to be able to do all the same things you can do with the Ingress controller, but the Gateway API gives you a lot more flexibility to deploy it in lots of different ways. To also, very simply, just you can split out your roles a lot more, because then you can just, the design of the Gateway API is so that different people who have different actual roles can only create and control certain things. You can use better namespace separating. The Ingress controller requires that the ingress and the service be in the same namespace. With our Gateway API, we wanted to sort of split that, so the root and the service still have to be in the same namespace, but the gateway doesn't have to be. And it's something which you can use that as a way to essentially make things easier for for your teams to split stuff out.
Very cool. Very cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today, Salil. Thanks for everyone here with us. We have a few minutes. If you want to ask some questions, we're here to answer them for you. If they want to find out more about the Gateway API, where should they go?
Yeah, so I would say the first place to go is ngrok's docs.
Okay.
So if you go to our docs page, we've done a bit of a revamp on our Kubernetes section to try and provide more detail on the Ingress controller, the Gateway API, how everything works. There's more docs coming. I'm in the middle of rewriting a good chunk of those, so there's a lot more good stuff coming.
Very cool.
Another thing I would check on our docs page as well is, and this is a relatively new addition that some people may not know about, is we have a page called What's New. And it is basically, it's like our changelog. And so, PMs and engineers are adding to that page all the time with new releases of stuff, not just Kubernetes stuff, but kind of, new versions of our agent and our SDKs, new features that are being deployed. So it's a great way to sort of keep up on what's happening. I can post a link to that in the chat as well. But also, the other thing I would say is check out our repo. It's current. We still have what we did with our repos. We had our Ingress controller repo, and we've added in the Gateway API capability, and it's now the Kubernetes Operator. But we're still in the middle of renaming the repo. We want to make sure it doesn't break anything for anyone when we rename it. But
Naming things
that's
is
why
hard.
it's. And it was at the time it was created, it was just an Ingress controller. Now it does a lot more stuff.
Right.
As I said, it still supports the Ingress controller. It supports the Gateway API. Yep, I believe that's been pasted in the chat as well.
Awesome. Thanks, David Alberto.
But yeah, it's one of those things which that's kind of what we have right now. One of the things that we're also just looking into is adding more capabilities and more Kubernetes specific features to that repo, trying to find ways to help with things like site-to-site connectivity, to help out people who are want to use ngrok as a way to not just make things available on the public internet and make it easily accessible, but also figuring out ways to help connect different Kubernetes clusters and things like that. Those are things we're actively investigating and trying to find ways to incorporate those into our operator. So it will really just be the goal for the operator is eventually to be, if you want to use ngrok to connect any Kubernetes to something, that's the way you're going to do it.
Yeah, that is the ultimate goal, right? So awesome. Okay. Well, thanks y'all for coming. Salil, thanks for taking the time to show us some of the cool stuff that's happening in the Kubernetes operator space. For folks who, yeah, definitely looks promising. Folks, give it a try.
Yeah.
Give us some feedback. We're always looking for feedback. We're trying to find ways to make it better. If it's something you're not using today, let us know why. That way we can know what we can do to make it more of a useful tool for you, because that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and I would encourage everyone to go to the repo and either open issues, or if you see issues because some of our issues are for things like bugs and stuff, but there are a few in there that are feature requests. And if there's a feature request that you see that hasn't been pulled in or checked, please give it I think you can use emojis to vote on it. That's really helpful for me as a product manager, because it gives me an idea of features that might be really important, that are very valuable to our community, and then that we need to start investigating or figuring out how to prioritize or solve. Because lots of people, there's going to be lots of people who have something that's very specific to them, but there's also lots of challenges that lots of people are facing, and it's a great way to influence, to give me feedback and to help influence the direction of what we build into our operator as well as our product generally.
Sure, for sure. Right. I'm also going to post a link to remind folks about the next roundtable. We'll be talking about the internal ngrok hackathon, where we will share some of the projects that our engineers built using the public ngrok SDKs, and showing how ngrok can integrate with various frameworks, various open source projects, and some of the ideas that they came up with there. But yeah, so we'll let you all go. And again, Salil, thanks for joining us. Thank you everyone else for joining us from around the world here at the ngrok Developer Roundtable, and we will see you next month.